Today on the Workplace Makers podcast, we spend a fascinating half hour with Janet Sernack. She's a global expert in innovation, and she shares freely about the frameworks and tools that she uses. She also talks about how innovation is playing out in this moment where we've got great resignation in the workplace, where executives and teams are rethinking the way they work, and where the workplace itself is being redefined. We learn what defines innovation, how people can manage the process, and how a workplace redesign is innovative or not, and what stops it. So I commend her to you. It's fantastic to talk with Janet, and I know you'll get a lot out of this. Today on the Workplace Makers podcast, we're speaking with Janet Sernack, and Janet partners with individuals, teams, and organizations to help them adapt, collaborate, and grow through disruption. She develops people's potential, specifically their capability to be agile, adaptive, creative, inventive, and innovative in an uncertain world. Janet is the founder and CEO of Imagine Nation, which she founded in 2010 in Israel, story there. And she's a sought after speaker at global conferences on the topic of innovation. Janet's clients include Hewlett-Packard, Chanel, Macquarie Bank, and her innovation blog is internationally award-winning, with specifically recognition of the thought leadership that she's providing to the people side of innovation. So Janet, welcome to the Workplace Makers podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Nina, for inviting me.
And so you have been a global thought leader on the people side of innovation for some time now. How did you get interested in the people side of innovation?
Oh, what a great question. So when I was working as a management consultant to the fashion industry, I realized that the best laid business plans and quality management plans ended up in the bottom drawer, because people didn't know the how-tos, they didn't know how to implement or execute those plans. So that really intrigued me and has taken me on, gosh, since then, probably a 25-year journey into learning and development and culture change, and ultimately into coaching, because from my experiences in organizational culture change, in transformational leadership, in top teams, and now in the innovation space, it's actually people who either make change happen or get in the way of change happening. So I grew up in the world of TQM when it was all about process.
Total quality management.
Standing alone and saying, no, it's not, it's about the people. And then I grew up again, repeat lesson in the world of innovation conferencing globally, where all the consultants were saying it's all about process, and I'm going, no, it's all about people. So I think it's finally an idea whose time has come. And when I read today, unfortunately I haven't printed it, the 5 toxic elements of that get in the way of a constructive corporate culture, it comes down to really simple things like respect, inclusion, all people factors, all mindset and behavior bits. So I think a lot of organizations are doing digital transformations, and inevitably they come to us because people know what they need to do. So we have a joke where we talk about allow, acknowledge, and accept that people are fearful of change. And they say to me, oh, we all know that, but it's hard to mobilize people to change until they can normalize things like failure and risk. And I've learned that that takes a lot of skills to provide the kind of learning, safe learning environment, and even coaching people at an individual level to mobilize and take action. So sorry for such a long.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I was just thinking there's so much to dive into here around that failure and tolerance of risk, and I think I'd love to come back to that. So as we understand innovation, are there any misconceptions you find people have about innovation? It's a big word. It's got a lot of meaning in it. It can mean something different to each, to 5 different people. You get 5 different answers. So let's think clearly about what innovation is. What is it to you, and what are the misconceptions people have?
Well, thank you for asking. One of the really interesting things that I realized when I started working in the innovation space, fortunately, it was in the startup nation where innovation and entrepreneurship has become a way of life. So it's very habitual, it's within the culture, is that most people didn't know how to make sense of innovation. So when I get asked, what's your definition of innovation? I get a bit provocative and go, I don't have a definition of innovation. We just start with a statement that pretty much says it's around change or something different that adds value. And if you think of it, you've got change, mega change, probably more change than anyone could have ever imagined. You've got difference. So it's not only about a product or a service or some kind of technology that's different. It's also the ability to be, think, and act differently. And then value, well, value in the eyes of who? So is it values in the eye of the customer, the end user, the stakeholders, or the ecosystem? So it just brings up, a multitude of questions. So we start with that as a like a blueprint, and then with each client, depending on their strategy, their strategic mandate, their vision, and their purpose, and depending on the outcomes that they want to achieve from innovation, we actually partner very closely with clients to come up with their own definition. And sometimes that's really difficult for them because it brings up questions like, well, who is our customer? So, for example, in a pharmaceutical company, is their customer the person that they buy their raw materials from? Is the customer the doctor who prescribes what it is that they're selling? Is the customer the hospital, or is the customer the patient? Or is it somebody, so it actually gets people to think a little bit more broadly. And then value. Value is an emotional word. So you've got to go and do research to think about, what does value mean to someone? In the context of their experience, the user experience of the client's product. So, and then difference, how do you break through the resistance and the fear so that people will be receptive and ready to change? And I've worked now in that field for more than 30 years, and it is a tough gig. Yep.
It's almost, there's so many parts to it. There are so many elements that are interlinking here to achieve a successful innovation, that it seems almost that there isn't anything to innovation that isn't people oriented. Would you say that's right?
I agree, because I kind of change management pretty much 101 when we were doing culture change programs. We needed to prepare people for change. We needed to teach them how to be accountable, how to achieve, how to perform at high levels. So yeah, everything about innovation is about people, whether it's an end user, a customer, a stakeholder, an ecosystem partner, a team or a leader, or the leadership team. If you've got it, for example, if you've got a dysfunctional leadership team, it's going to be very hard to innovate or affect any kind of change. So I think the world is realizing now, as we're in the midst of so much disruption, that, we need to partner with people, collaborate with people to enable them to make the kind of change that they need to make to be future fit in the 21st century.
So powerful. So I have a feeling that workplace leaders and workplace managers could learn a lot about how to manage workplace transformations and redesigns from this discipline of innovation management. And so often workplace transformations will start as an idea, that can realize value, but they will have varying degrees of success in achieving that. So do you think that workplace redesigns and transformations are innovations and are similar to the innovation process? And
Okay. Oh, that's such a big question. So the first thing is that nothing is innovative unless someone, it goes back to marketing 101. Nothing is innovative unless someone is willing to exchange value for something. So we talk a lot about the importance of commercialization and the business model. So nothing is innovative until it is delivered to someone who is ready to pay money for it. So that's the first point. Going back to your question, any kind of, I'll give you probably a client example might be more relevant. I've got clients that are 2 years into a digital transformation and they're focused mostly on processes and systems. So in many ways, that's absolutely one of the things that you do need to focus on transforming. So you need to do that to be more efficient, to be more productive, and to introduce new technologies and get rid of the old legacy ways of working. But they forgot the end. So the end is behavior. So if you can't support your transformation or your change program through helping people shift, firstly, their intrinsic motivation, secondly, their mindset, and thirdly, their behaviors, then it's not going to happen because, if I'm in that organization, I'll look at my boss and he's just doing business as usual, everything that he's or she's always done in the past. So why should I change? So they've forgotten about shifting, providing the intrinsic motivators, shifting the mindsets and introducing behaviors as new habits, making them habitual. So if their change process perhaps has a set of guiding principles or a set of values, what does this mean in terms of what people do and say in this new world of work? The other thing that they've forgotten are what Edgar Schein calls the artifacts, and some people call symbols. So if you are looking to innovate, if you are still symbolically rewarding individuals for individual achievement, then you're not going to get collaborative achievement. If you're still giving the most senior executives, I'm giving like generalized examples, the car parking place closest to the entrance of the company, and you're talking about, oh, we're so inclusive and we're all really equal here, then that's a symbol that is out of integrity with what it is that you're trying to do. So I'm finding now that a lot of the digital transformations are now regressing because people have sort of frozen. We know we need to change. We understand we need to shift our mindset, but we still don't have a safe environment to start to do it. So we create a safety zone, which is evocative and provocative and disruptive. And yet it helps people normalize their fear of failure, of success or whatever. And it helps them normalize their notion of if you take a risk and you fail, that you don't get punished. So we help them create environments where they can, what we call face everything and rise, in a way where they can contribute towards innovating within that digital transformation. Because digital transformations, in effect, don't deliver innovation. They just deliver incremental change or continuous improvement. So I think the market's sort of still trying to make sense of innovation, which is where we started. What's incremental, what's radical, what's breakthrough, what's differential, and what are we going to go for?
Yes, so interesting. So we've got to acknowledge there's different brands of innovation there. There's different models, if you like. Or I could
Yep.
choose a Honda version. I could choose a Lexus version. I could choose the Ferrari version. Perhaps which of those is going to be best suited to the organization. So that there's a different way of right sizing it to each situation.
Yep.
And is there something that is critical in each of those as a success factor? So regardless of what your innovation looks like, what would you say? Is there one success factor? Or is that the way to think about it? Or like there's a number of things that you've touched on. What would you say is critical to make innovation work?
It's actually, you've hit the nail on the head again. It's how they approach it strategically. So there's a group called Strategizer, and I honestly will always say, go to Strategizer. They make the complex really simple. They've come up with a really good strategic model that they call explore or exploit. So it's not like when you innovate, you throw the baby out with the with the bathwater. What you do is you exploit. Again, it goes back to marketing 101. You exploit your cash cows, or what's working well, or your best sellers, or the brand reverences, the things that people love about your brand. So the Honda example is a great one. People love Honda because they're small, affordable, nimble little cars. So what we do is we build on our core product benefits or features, and we just add some kind of new special feature that extends the life cycle of the product. And Apple do this really superbly. The other thing they say is that you need to exploit. So where are the openings, the new niches, or the blue oceans, another great resource? What is wanting to emerge in the future? What might my customers need or want in the future? So it's about having the lens, both, we call it's paradoxical, both and, explore and exploit simultaneously. And then they take it to another level where they talk about what do you need to sustain, what do you need to transform, and I can't remember the third one. I think it's what do you need to break through. So typically, it's supported again by 3 horizon thinking. What do you need to do today? What do you need to focus on tomorrow? And what do you need to focus on for the future? And I think in HBR, they say 50% today, 20% tomorrow, 30% tomorrow, and 20% the future. So it's having your eyes on the whole of the environment, the whole of the system, and just choosing where you go, what's going to deliver the outcomes that you want for the organization and for your people and for your customer.
So interesting, because you mentioned earlier how that you're seeing that workplaces are stuck in their digital transformations. They're either have reached a point where it no longer serves them. It's no longer adding that value, or they're trying to work out, how does hybrid look for us? What's our new normal? How do we proceed here? So it'd be really interesting to play out that explore and exploit kind of thinking, and think, there's opportunities that have previously existed that we could dial up essentially. And then there's, potentially whole new blue sky possibilities. Like one of the things I was speaking with a colleague about just this week was the potential for workspace areas to break away from desks completely and be much more mobile, and have people moving up and down, still potentially doing that thinking work, or doing some focused work, but in a completely different setting to what we've done before, because the rules are off.
There are no rules. Like I learned to work in coffee shops 10 years ago. As long as I had a laptop, I
Mm.
could pretty well work anywhere. And in Israel, it's really interesting. All the trains have power sockets to charge your phones and your mobiles. And this is like,
Mm.
how many years? This is 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And they had desks. So
On the
you
train.
would see, yeah. This is like, you would see people get on the train and actually go to work and charge their phones or be on their headsets. And, 90% of the carriage would be working, whereas you get on a train in Melbourne and, you just don't have that facility.
Don't
I
have that.
also read
Yeah.
recently in a Fast Company article how one company for environmental reasons took out their elevators and created open staircases through the building. And not only did it help people become fitter, but it actually helped people talk to each other. So it
Fantastic
actually
tool for
shifted
that.
the whole culture of the organization just through, staircases.
And
So
that one
there's
thing
just
can be really
it
powerful. Mm.
doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to cost a fortune, and it doesn't all have to be technology based. I mean,
Mm.
it's how do we bring another real pet of mine is how do we bring humanity? There's not a lot of. It's a tough time in the world at the moment. If we could all bring more humanity into our workplaces, what a difference it would make. And it's not just about technology. Technology is there to serve us, not, it shouldn't
Mm.
be our master and we shouldn't be slaves to it.
So speaking of that, one of the areas of interest for me that I've talked with a couple of people about on the podcast is the business case for people-oriented workplaces. That it can be that conversation at the executive table is very much, it's about the numbers, it's a black and white decision, it's about the bottom line. How is this investment going to translate to an increase in dollars, essentially? Or, how is there going to be a clear cost benefit analysis here? And that can be,
Okay.
yeah. Thoughts on
So
that?
cost benefit analysis starts with the cost of loss, when there is the cost of talent. There's heaps of data now about what it costs to attract and retain and lose key talent. And if we've got the great resignation, that should be at the forefront of every leadership team on the planet. People have, so that's the first thing. The second thing is people have so many choices. I left corporate life 35 years ago this year to have more autonomy, more freedom, more mastery. And I think a lot more people now, even the ATO here in Australia, there's an app now for helping contract workers manage their tax. So, people have far more choices and they're making different kinds of lifestyle decisions. So on the one hand, you've got the cost benefit in the cost of talent. On the other hand, you've got people with so many more options and choices. So you need to consider that. And I know from some of my coaching clients, and I'm going to be a bit provocative, will say to me, how can I convince a 70-year-old man, a grey-haired man in a suit who used to work for one of the big 4 consulting firms, that we need to start to think about the people in our organisation, and if they're more satisfied, then our customers will be more satisfied. So whether it's generational change, I don't know. The hold on change by middle-aged white people in suits, that has to eventually go. And also it's a mindset shift. It is a mindset shift. And I think a lot of the big consulting companies are starting to also understand the value of people, and they're starting to crunch a lot more numbers, and there's a lot more data coming through. So you need to look at the world through a different lens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different mindset. Again, what does the organization value? What do those executive team members value particularly, and what to them is going to look like success? So there's some fundamental mindset pieces there, isn't there?
And behaviors.
You know,
if you've got a board or an executive team that isn't accountable for anything, then you're going to have an organization that isn't accountable for anything either. If you have a board that's not collaborative and non-achieving, then you're going to have an organization that is non-achieving and non-collaborative. So people really matter. That was at the heart of all the work, certainly, that I've been doing in the last 30 years.
And you're a partner or associated or connected with Singularity University Australia. So you're
Yes.
thinking quite a bit around some really blue sky thinking, some emerging technologies and trends that they pick up on. And what are you seeing right now is changing either in the workplace and workspace design, if you're seeing anything coming up there, or in this leadership and management piece?
I think that's a really good question as well. With SU, what I love about them is how they really represent two core mindsets. One is abundance, is that there is enough of everything in the world, and those people that you talk about who are number crunching are very much coming from scarcity. So philosophically, I think the abundance mindset is far more useful. The second thing that they really embrace and embody is the possibility mindset. So that so aligns with my values: possible in the world, possible for me. It's only a matter of how. The third pillar that really supports them is that, anything is possible through technology. So, for example, with the advent of robotics, there's a lot of fear that, robots are going to replace people. They'll come out with a whole business case about how robots will serve people, and then hone in on what are the skills that people are going to need in the future to get maximum usage and benefit from robots. So I think what the latest SU post this morning was saying how the UK is looking at investing £16 billion in creating solar panels in space. Wow. So my scientific husband says, oh, that's absolutely impossible. But Singularity believe it's possible, and will come up with the scientist perspectives and research that will actually say how it's done. So it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, fascinating. And so are there any tips or tools or frameworks that you really recommend, that you draw on when it comes to innovation? So you've mentioned Strategizer, you've mentioned some frameworks there and some names which we'll add to the show notes, but are there any other handy go-to tools that people can use to frame their thinking when they're working with innovation?
Well, of course, is look at our blogs on imagination.com.au and janetsernack.com.au. So we're very much thought leaders on innovation learning, innovation coaching, and we have some great resources that can measure and assess an organisation or a team's or a leader's ability to adapt and grow through disruption. So what I think is I'd much rather give people's tips. The first tip is just get out of the office, whether it's a physical space or a mental space. Get out and look at what is going on in the world. So, for example, yesterday we went to an exhibition at what is one of our major department stores. Obviously, traffic is down, so they had a whole empty floor. So they now lease it out to a exhibition company, and we saw a full-size version of the Sistine Chapel done through digital print.
Wow.
Wow. So I've been to the Sistine Chapel in Rome, and I'm sure some of your listeners have, but I never got to understand the innovation that Michelangelo did in the 1540s by being actually in Rome at the Vatican. But what I could understand through seeing the presentation, the innovation that he orchestrated himself, by actually painting as a sculptor would paint. So he created an inflection point in the Renaissance. So innovation is everywhere, but you need to open your mind, your heart, and your will to be present to it. So I think the first thing is just get out of the office and go and look at how much and through history there has been innovation, and innovation can change the world, which is why I play in it. The next thing is to always look at both sides of the paradox. Be willing to work with what is and don't have a black and white perspective. Always work with what is going on, even if you don't like it or it conflicts with your values, to pull yourself and others towards what could be. And that's very much a paradox lens. And then expose yourself to people like Strategizer, like IDEO. There's some amazing champions. There's an incredible number of global innovation summits. And the third thing, and I just want to say, is be willing to unlearn. Be willing to unlearn what may have worked previously in the past. So it's a really big space for us now to unlearn a lot of old mental models, a lot of old paradigms, and create that empty space to relearn the new language, the new behaviors, and the new skills, to flourish through disruption and uncertainty and instability. So I think they're my 3 tips, and there's so many amazing online learning opportunities to throw yourself into, with that open mind and that open heart and that open will. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's so inspiring to step back, to spend this time thinking about the opportunities that are in this moment, this time that we're in, where things are being reconsidered. And there's always, as you've said, there's innovation happening from 1540 with Michelangelo and all throughout history. So it's exciting to be just to take this moment to be inspired by that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very cool. So I've discovered there's one other topic that is universal amongst my guests, and that is we all seem to love food. So what is your favorite meal to eat or cook?
That's another really great question. My favorite food, okay, having done the full circle of first class, 5-star, and travel the world extensively throughout my career, I actually go back to simple.
Nice.
Have gone back to simple. So I am vegetarian.
Yes.
So my favorite foods are fresh vegetables, fresh fish, and fresh fruit. And I'm very grateful that I live in an environment, where there is an abundance of those things. I do have a tendency towards Malaysian food, and my particular favorite in Malaysian food is ikan bilis, which are fried anchovies.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. That's where you're vegetarian rather than vegan. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I do eat fish, although
yeah.
I'm starting now to go poor fish. So um,
Fantastic.
it's
Never
tough.
tried that, but I'm inspired. I'm going to give that a go. I'm going to look out for it. Or maybe find
A
your
Malaysian smorgasbord is just heaven.
Yum. That sounds amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Janet. Thank you for your time and for being willing to share so much of your insight. And the website for people is imagination.com. And we'll pop that in the show notes as well. So appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.